Hi, my name is Chris and I'm doing my PhD in anthrozoology with Exeter University. My research focuses on cat-human relations and discourses surrounding free-roam and urban cats. And today I'm going to talk about a chapter entitled Feral and Out of Control, a Moral Panic over Domestic Cats. Known to many as the notoriously independent companion animal that roams neighborhoods worldwide, as a species, Felis catus occupies a somewhat liminal status between domesticated and wild or wild-like. My research asks, what are the various discourses surrounding free-roaming and free-living cats, and examines social discourses surrounding cats living in urban neighborhoods. I first collected comments responding to 7 different news articles, magazine pieces, and a YouTube video. These were chosen to sample a variety of responses from both cat guardians and those not overly attached to cats. For example, the YouTube video by Jackson Galaxy discussed his take on whether or not we should keep cats inside. Galaxy's fan base of cat lovers ensured a wealth of reactions and responses from cat guardians around the world. The BBC and Daily Mail news articles provided a means to sample some reactions from individuals less emotionally attached to cats. And this data consisted of almost 2,500 comments from 1,800 unique users. Comments that went beyond the scope of my thesis were coded as off-topic and put to one side. The remainder I divided between 3 thematic groups that comprise key chapters of my PhD thesis. Today I'm going to talk about this group shown here in green, which are comments containing discourses about free-roaming cats and their impact on wildlife, and how this relates to perceptions of urban cats. These 370 comments were thematically coded as a separate group. And to build upon emerging themes, I developed a qualitative survey, and this generated data from a further 77 respondents. Several prominent themes were related to predation, that is, cats killing wildlife. In response to Jackson Galaxy's video, which was focused on cat safety, and listed his reasons for keeping cats indoors from that cat safety perspective, there were a few comments along the line of, he didn't mention the horrible impact cats have on wildlife. They're responsible for several extinctions. Many cat guardians also support cat confinement for the sake of wildlife, although this is often secondary to cat safety concerns. Consistent with previous studies regarding national differences, for example, see Hall et al. 2016 and Foreman-Worsley 2021. Cat guardians in the UK are more likely than their US counterparts to believe cats are happier roaming and do have a right to do so. And consequently, we're more likely to accept predation as just what cats do. For example, commenting on how they don't like that cats kill wildlife, but that this is nature. However, there is no short supply of anti-cat comments, such as, cats are awful, selfish killer machines. They kill for fun, not just to eat. And to those who dislike neighborhood cats, the conservationist literature on the effects of predation by cats provides justification for their generic disdain of the species. Which brings me to my next point. Namely, that the dominant conservationist discourse and media reporting is misrepresenting free-roaming cats by framing them as a global threat to biodiversity, rather than a localized threat to specific ecosystems. In 2019, Linetel accused fellow academics of creating a moral panic over cats, and I will return to that term in the next slide. But here we have a BBC article with the title asking, should cats be culled to stop extinctions? The article goes on to describe a peer-reviewed study by Holmes et al. That reported how non-native species are a threat to native insular species. And although the paper does call for the eradication of non-native species in these habitats, including cats, it is not exclusively about cats. Yet that is the focus this BBC journalist chose. The data does suggest that predation by cats is a threat to endemic wildlife in many places, such as the ecosystems described by Holmes et al. And I'm not arguing against the science per se. However, I am questioning how conservationist discourse feeds into attitudes surrounding free-roaming urban cats in westernized neighborhoods, namely the US and the UK. My data shows how news articles are frequently taken out of context, with many respondents apparently reacting solely to the headline. Indeed, 20 responses to this emotive BBC headline simply wrote yes, often capitalized. And you need to read the article to realize that it is about specific ecosystems. However, people often do not read beyond the headline, and the comments related to either a fear that pet cats were going to be targeted, or a glee at the idea of killing neighborhood cats reflects that. Linatel are not denying that cats are a threat to some populations in certain ecosystems, but they are saying that this is not the case everywhere, and that the discourse is creating a moral panic. First coined by Cohen in 1972, a moral panic describes a phenomenon whereby a condition, episode, person, or groups of persons emerges to become defined as a threat to societal values and interests. Its nature is presented in a stylized and stereotypical fashion by mass media. Key features of a moral panic are that something or someone is defined as a threat to commonly held values or interests. This threat is depicted in an easily recognizable form by the media, termed the folk devil. There is a rapid buildup of public concern or outrage, leading to pressure for opinion makers to respond and demanding immediate action from the authorities. Finally, the panic either recedes or results in societal or policy changes. And these are often negative consequences because they are driven by fear or outrage. These stages are often depicted as linear events, but in reality are often interlinked and iterative. And I attempt to show this in this diagram here on the right. But essentially, moral panics center around a person or a group who are framed as transgressive, that is the folk devil, and subsequent reactions are disproportional to the real threat. Are free roaming cats a genuine threat or an example of a folk devil? And are conservationists and the media guilty of creating a moral panic over cats? Linatel may have used a more colloquial iteration of the term, and Rowe notes how moral panic has entered the popular lexicon as a catchphrase or a cliche that is frequently deployed to play down levels of threat as being exaggerated or overblown. Is this what is going on here? I think not. A moral panic does not mean the threat or concern is fictional, and Linatel are not denying the impact cats have on some ecosystems. However, the idea that all free roaming cats are bad could be described as a moral panic. And to empirically test this, I examined discourses surrounding proposals to kill free living cats that are presented in the popular media. Despite the article also proposing the eradication of non-native rodents and pigs, respondents to the BBC article shown earlier were predominantly focused on cats. And what is interesting is a sizable portion of comments were reacting to an imagined scenario whereby suburban neighborhood cats were also under attack, with several expressing sentiments such as "leave my cats alone." However, the more aggressive comments clearly viewed neighborhood cats as pests or vermin, even expressing a desire to see them come to harm. Others expressed a reluctant acceptance to the idea of killing feral cats as being not nice, but sometimes necessary. Although this latter group did tend to be more directed towards the subject of cats living in areas where they were impacting endemic species, common comments included those supporting keeping companion cats everywhere inside for the sake of wildlife. Although there were nuances, discourses related to free roaming cats are often polarizing. As a species, cats occupy a liminal status as being neither fully domesticated nor completely wild, which is something that Crowley et al. Discuss in Our Wild Companions, Domestic Cats in the Anthropocene. And my analysis revealed how contradictory thinking was regarding cats. As a species, they are reviled as murderers of wild animals, or seen as wild animals themselves, or seen as domesticated animals that have no place roaming unsupervised. However, the idea of killing a species known and loved as companion animals is problematic in terms of public acceptance. Sutton and Taylor draw attention to how media plays a central role in defining the boundaries of classification such as feral or pest, which renders groups of free-living animals more killable. In a paper I co-authored, we talk about how the word feral serves as a tool to exert power over undesirable animal populations by rendering them different from desirable or useful members of the same species. So when articles talk about feral cats, we can better distance them from our beloved companion animals. An example of this effect is evident in comments such as, "I love my pets, but when they go feral, it's a different story." Or, "Calm down, folks, there's a big difference between little Fluffy you adore and a feral cat population. For a start, feral cats are not pets, they're wild animals. From the conservationist perspective, populations are assigned greater value than the individual. However, the essential difference between Fluffy and a cat living apart from humans is their circumstance of birth." But the wording of the above comment implies that being cherished and cared for by humans renders a feline life inherently more valuable. Conservationists are concerned with preserving wild animal species, and Felis catus is not a wildcat species or considered a wild animal worthy of protection. As a species, Felis catus is far from threatened. However, to render lethal management strategies of species such as Felis catus more palatable, there is a need to separate and other certain members of the species, hence feral. However, the feral cat folk devil is not confined to rural Australia. And free roaming and free living cats are arguably being demonized around the world. Essentially, moral panics are escalated by emotive journalistic pieces, such as the BBC headline we saw earlier, that are read by audiences around the world. And from my data, it is apparent that information is being processed through a local lens. For example, in response to an article discussing cat populations in rural Australia, a commenter wrote, "I don't understand why people think it's okay to let their cats roam neighborhoods or poop in people's gardens." So clearly this commenter is just jumping on the anti-cat bandwagon and not really engaging at all in the contents of this article. Furthermore, the idea that every roaming cat is an environmental disaster is widespread. But is this evidence of an unnecessary panic over cats fueled by irresponsible conservationist discourse and journalism? Perhaps. But is this all that's going on? Mika in 2010 proposed a typology of moral panics involving non-human animals, namely those over transgressive animals, e.g. urban foxes, or indeed feral cats, those about human deviance in which the animals actually occupy the place of victim, for example, the case of the Croydon cat killer, and those caused by human deviance leading to transgressive animals, such as out of control dogs. So the dogs are not blamed, it's the people. And the discourses analysed here were primarily blaming the cats as inherently transgressive animals. Although there was some blame directed towards humans for allowing cats to roam and procreate freely. However, a minority worried that eradication plans would target cats everywhere, and that cats were actually the victim of a moral panic over feral cats. Regardless of whether conservationist and media discourses are creating or fueling a moral panic over free roaming cats, how we think about cats does matter. To start thinking more sensibly about cats requires moving away from the black and white approach whereby all free roaming cats are a scourge, while not ignoring evidence-based problems. We need to consider cats as individuals, not just populations, and to recognise that free roaming cats in rural Australia are very different from neighbourhood cats in a London suburb. And we need to account for the environment as well as a cat's disposition. But most importantly, I believe conservationist issues need to be disentangled from social discourses about free roaming urban cats. So I'm just flashing up this reference slide in case you want to pause and take notes, or you can just contact me and I'll send you a copy of the slides. And with that, I'm happy to answer any questions. Thank you for your attention.